They were the biggest voices in country music, a genre built on heartbreak, and one by one, the industry that made them famous kept the tab open long after everyone around them could see exactly what it was doing. Nashville has a word for what happened to these men: talent. It is much slower to use the other word: complicity. Labels kept recording them. Promoters kept booking them. Executives on Music Row kept collecting the royalties, long after the drinking stopped being a rumor and started being a body count. This is the story of 7 country legends alcohol destroyed, ranked by how far the fall went and by how long Nashville kept pouring. Number 7. Charlie Rich, the man who burned his own career. In 1974, Charlie Rich was the CMA's Entertainer of the Year. 1 year later, on October 13, 1975, he walked out to hand the same award to his successor, visibly drunk, having spent the evening on gin and tonic stacked on top of painkillers for a broken foot. He fumbled the envelope, slurred through the nominees, and when he finally got it open, he pulled out a lighter and set fire to the card before announcing the winner. My friend, Mr. John Denver. The room went cold. Rich never received another CMA nomination. Years later, he said it was not a protest at all. He called it a mistake and pointed to a lifelong anxiety panic disorder colliding with the pills and the liquor that night. The moment the whole industry remembers as rebellion was actually a man in crisis, live on national television, and Nashville simply closed the door on him. Number 6. Faron Young, the star. Nashville let go quiet. Faron Young racked up more than 60 country chart hits and helped launch Chris Christopherson and Roger Miller's careers before either was famous. But by the early 90s, bitter about how the industry treated its aging stars, he'd withdrawn almost entirely, battling emphysema and prostate cancer alone. On December 9, 1996, he shot himself at his Nashville home, dying the following day at 64. His suicide note cited his failing health and his belief that country music had forgotten him, not a drink, directly. Alcoholism had shadowed Young for decades before that final night. But the honest read here isn't that liquor pulled the trigger. It's that an industry built on his voice let him fade into isolation and didn't notice until it was too late. Number 5. Gary Stewart, the king of honky-tonk nobody came back for. Gary Stewart's "She's Actin' Single, I'm Drinkin' Doubles" hit number 1 on the Billboard country charts in 1975 and made him honky-tonk royalty. But as the genre moved on, the outlaw country movement pulling attention one direction, the polished Nashville sound pulling it another, so did radio. And Stewart spent decades battling drugs and alcohol that were never a secret to anyone who worked with him. In 1988, his son took his own life, reportedly tied to substance abuse in the family, a detail Nashville's own historians still treat with some caution. Then, on November 26, 2003, his wife of 43 years died of pneumonia. Stewart canceled his remaining shows. 3 weeks later, on December 16th, he was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, a note beside him reading simply that he couldn't go on without her. Decades of substance abuse shaped his entire career, but it was grief, not the bottle, that finally took him. Number 4. Lefty Frizzell, the voice every legend copied, while his own label let him vanish. George Jones, Merle Haggard, Keith Whitley, George Strait. Nearly every major country vocalist since 1950 has cited Lefty Frizzell as the reason they sing the way they do. Frizzell was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1982, 4 years after his death, because that's often how Nashville honors the people it failed while they were alive. And yet, by the early 70s, Columbia Records and producer Don Law had long since moved on, was releasing only a fraction of what Frizzell was still actively recording. His drinking had become constant, and it had driven his blood pressure to dangerous levels. By multiple accounts, he refused to take the medication for it because it interfered with the drinking. On July 19, 1975, he suffered a massive stroke and died at 47. The man who taught country music how to phrase a lyric couldn't get his own record label to put out the songs he was still writing. Number 3. George Jones, No Show Jones, and the label that kept the cameras rolling. In 1979 alone, George Jones missed 54 shows. Promoters sued him. He filed for bankruptcy in 1978, $1 million in debt, while still owing Tammy Wynette $36,000 in child support. And through all of it, MCA Nashville kept recording him. Label VP Sheila Shipley Biddy said it plainly years later. The music was still in the groove, so the hits kept coming even while the man behind them was falling apart. That's not speculation about Nashville's complicity. That's an executive, on the record, admitting the business kept pouring because the business was still profitable. Jones was committed to a psychiatric hospital in 1983 and got sober in March of 1984 at 52. He spent years afterward playing back every show he'd missed, for free. The same industry that let him rot also, eventually let him come home. George Jones was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1992, sober and on his own terms. Number 2, Hank Williams, fired by the institution that made him. Nobody in this story built Nashville's legend like Hank Williams, and no one shows what kept pouring really means better than the Grand Ole Opry itself. The Opry's home at the Ryman Auditorium was the most sacred stage in American music, and Williams had burned brighter on it than almost anyone. After years of missed shows and drunken performances, Opry manager Jim Denny fired Williams on August 11, 1952, 2 days after Williams no-showed again. The firing wasn't meant to be permanent, just a wake-up call. Williams never got the chance to come back. He died on New Year's Day, 1953, 29 years old, in the back seat of his own Cadillac on the way to a show in Canton, Ohio. Alcohol combined with morphine for his chronic back pain is widely cited as the cause. The Grand Ole Opry, the single most powerful institution in country music, didn't create an intervention. It created a firing, and then a funeral. Number 1, Keith Whitley, the death that should have never made this list. Keith Whitley wasn't fading. He had studied the greats obsessively, Lefty Frizzell's phrasing, George Jones's emotion, and by the winter of 1988 into 1989, 3 singles from his album Don't Close Your Eyes hit number 1 on the Billboard country charts. He was, by every measure, arriving. On the morning of May 9, 1989, his brother-in-law left him at home planning a day of golf. When he returned an hour later, Whitley was dead. The medical examiner found a blood alcohol level of 0.47, 6 times Tennessee's legal driving limit at the time, and ruled it acute ethanol poisoning. His wife, Lori Morgan, later said she used to tie the belt of her robe to his ankle at night just to know if he tried to get up and start drinking again. She was on tour in Alaska the weekend he died. Even his exact age is disputed. His gravestone says 34. His wife and his passport say 33. A small, strange footnote on a story that has none of the ambiguity where it actually matters. Keith Whitley was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2022, more than 3 decades after Music Row watched one of its brightest stars slip away. This wasn't a slow fall from grace. It was a man at the absolute peak of his career, and it still wasn't enough to save him. 7 stories, 1 pattern. But it's worth saying plainly, this isn't a clean story of villains and victims. The same industry that let George Jones miss 54 shows in a single year also gave him a stage to walk back onto, sober, and play every one of them again for free. Nashville kept pouring, but in at least one case, it also kept the door open. Which one of these hit you hardest? Drop a comment. Are you Team Keith Whitley, Team Hank Williams, or Team George Jones? If this changed how you think about country music's golden eras, hit that like button and subscribe to The Country Cut for more of the stories Nashville would rather you forgot.